Welcome to the second part of our interview with Mr. Brecht Wyseur. Brecht is a director Cybersecurity Standardization at Kudelski IoT and board member of the DLMS User Association. With a strong background in cryptography and cybersecurity standardization, Brecht plays a key role in defining security practices for smart energy and IoT technologies. Brecht, welcome back.
Thank you.
How do current and upcoming regulations impact the way utility security is implemented, and do you think they are sufficient?
It's a great question. So maybe first of all, so this is the second part of the interview we did. So in the first part, we have been talking a lot about transition, so transition of the infrastructure, transition of the way how you do security in that matter. Here again, we also need to think about the transition. What does that mean for regulators? I think regulators play a very important role into stimulating that things that happen in that transition happen in a cybersecure manner. So the regulators, they need to enable new incentives for the different actors in the market to be cybersecure. And secondly, they also need to enable new business models. Actually, those two things go in hand. So if you look at it from the utility point of view, so the utility in the new infrastructures, they have requirements to open data. So typically metering data, for example, that is being measured at households or in industry, that metering data has value for taking decisions, also not only for the utility, but also for the end consumer. Like a end consumer has an interest to say, okay, I want to charge my battery or I want to charge my car at this given time because my consumption of my energy facilitates that, or the tarification is favorable for doing that. So that requires open data. And it's important that the utility opens its network to some extent to connect those devices, to get that data or to make decisions. Now, to reach at that point, you need to have utilities opening their data. You need to have consumers that are using use cases that are being provided by manufacturers that implement them and have their devices ready. So all of this needs incentives. If you look at it from the historic point of view, the business model of a utility is mostly guaranteeing power, bringing power from generation to the consumer, and they are paid for that usually per kilowatt hour. If that business model remains as such, being a revenue based on per kilowatt hour, what would their incentive be to invest more into opening data? So we need to figure out new business models, and the regulators play an important part in that. New business models such that the utilities have an incentive to invest in new use cases for infrastructure. Additionally, we want that devices that get connected to those networks, they also are cyber secure. We discussed in the first part about how can you do that? Do you need certification schemes? How that work? How can a utility validate that a certain device works? Can it rely on certification schemes for that? Also there, the regulators play an important role. They need to put in place the rules, the frameworks by which devices or systems even as a whole can be validated, and that there can be a certification, a proof that a certain device is secure. And based on that, utility can decide, okay, yes, I integrate that device, or yes, I can use that device to now enable new use cases. So I think for regulators, very important, think about new business models to incentivize those, and then think about how to put in place the regulatory landscape. What's happening today, I think this is going into that direction. It's going in the right direction, I think. If you look, for example, at in Europe, you have the Cyber Resilience Act. You also have the NIS2 that has been recently also enforced. The Cyber Resilience Act is upcoming, is actually providing a framework around product security, defining rules on what does a manufacturer need to do to enable secure product design, also and to maintain products secure over its lifetime through vulnerability handling and vulnerability management, through firmware updates and so forth. So there are certification schemes that are being discussed and being defined. I think that's very valuable. So I think it's going in the right direction. And I hope that we keep going that path, and the way how the implementation of the regulation is going to be done is going to support this. So that's in Europe. The United States has a slightly different approach. So Europe has this approach with the CRA and the Radio Equipment Directive and the NIS2 to enforce the market. You can only get access to the market if you comply. The US market is more going into, for non-critical infrastructure at least, like for example for EV charging stations and so forth, they are going to more a voluntary market. So they say if you comply, you get a stamp, and we hope that this stamp, this trust mark, will motivate consumers to buy equipment that is correctly validated, rather than putting cheap equipment that puts risks in place in the market. But this will also evolve, so we'll have to see how that goes, and I'm confident that what's happening today is going in the right direction for what the regulators are doing.
What do you think about NIS1 and NIS2 directives? What is your experience with it?
So on NIS2, so that's the more recent update, which is currently being implemented by different regions in Europe. So NIS2 has a number of aspects that are very useful. Like for example, the NIS2 requirements, they apply not only to the manufacturer itself or the network operator, but they also apply to the suppliers thereof. So I think this is already very important. When we talked in our previous part about utility, needs to look at the suppliers, the manufacturers, what they do, and then the manufacturers, they need to design their products based on what they have in their supply chain. NIS2 is really looking at that supply chain. So I think that's an important aspect, that from a cybersecurity point of view, you look to your entire supply chain on how you manage security. So that's one important aspect. Another important aspect is with respect to vulnerability reporting. So we can only know how secure a system is or how good our situation is if we know what the issues are, if we observe them. And so NIS2 includes some parts of that as well. We see customers also of Kudelski, they have a lot of questions around that. And so in our company, we have been developing advisory services to our customers into putting in place compliance to NIS2. We also have services on validating if devices they are good. We look at the entire supply chain. So we also have technology on how we can make sure that when security technology is being integrated quite early in the supply chain, you can leverage that later down in the supply chain. So for example, when you would commission devices, you can leverage certain functionality or identity that has been integrated into the chipset, for example. Yeah, we have a lot of activities in that part.
So we mentioned in first part that maybe in next few years we can expect certification process. So for manufacturers of equipment, so we can say that certification process can be some continuation of NIS2 directive. Yeah,
so in Europe, actually, you've got several new regulations that are coming, new acts that are coming. They are actually all a bit of a part of an overarching framework under the Cybersecurity Act in Europe. So with the CSA, so the Cybersecurity Act, with the Radio Equipment Directive, with the NIS2, also with the EIDAS for electronic documents, and then last but not least with the Cyber Resilience Act. That's a group of new regulations that are being put in place in the last few years and the upcoming years. In there, one of the core issues that the regulation is addressing is the fact that today in Europe, the different regions may have different ways of how they certify devices. Like for example, in France, if you have a smart meter, it needs to be CSPN certified in order to be able to connect it to sell it to the utility or to connect it to its network. But that's for the French market. It's recognized in some other markets, but it is not an overarching solution. So that's what the new regulations are addressing. And so indeed, we will in the next few years see certification schemes coming that are under the umbrella regulation that is upcoming. For example, under the CSA, so the Cybersecurity Act in Europe, you have the program of the EUCC, the European Common Criteria Certification Framework. Under there, we will see certification for equipment that also is related to critical infrastructure. It's the Cyber Resilience Act that is putting the rules properly in place of what device needs to be certified with what. So yeah, this is coming, and actually, coincidentally, it's a very timely interview that we have, because just a few days ago we saw the first components that were certified under the EUCC. So yesterday when I had a look at that, there were 2 components that have been certified under the European Common Criteria. So this is coming, that's the overarching certification program. And then this will also grow towards certification schemes for specific products. And under the Cyber Resilience Act, those products are being defined, including, for example, smart meter gateways. So that's a very hope-giving situation that is coming.
It is interesting that certification start, that we have examples of that. Okay, looking ahead, how do you see the evolution of cybersecurity in utilities over the next years, and what should the industry stakeholders prioritize? Do you see, you mentioned that regulatives are many in preparation. Do you think that it is enough, or that something should be added? Do you have something to add about that?
So on the regulation, if it's enough today, I think there's a lot of work ongoing in what I just mentioned before about the Cyber Resilience Act, for example. I'm talking a lot about Europe for now, but the situation is similar also in other regions. But I think if it's enough, I think this is something that we will need to see the next few months, because the implementation is ongoing as we speak. So there is feedback from the European Commission that the implementation should be ready somewhere before summertime this year. So we'll have to see if that is sufficient, if the member states then agree on that framework and on the specific requirements. I'm very hopeful for that. If that is going in the right direction, I think that's a good path to continue. Let's see the next few months how things go.
Okay, and one interesting question. What do you think about this, particularly in light of advancements in quantum computing?
Okay, so that's a technology transition.
Yeah.
I'm almost surprised you didn't ask about AI. That's the other buzzword that we have in the market.
It will be next.
But yeah, quantum is like the elephant in the room. It's the next big challenge that we need to tackle in the market, definitely in the energy market. So maybe just in a nutshell, so the threat that the quantum computing is imposing is the fact that you've got new computing capabilities that become available, which can be used to attack cryptographic algorithms that are currently being used in the market. And so if those quantum computing capabilities can be used, then they could potentially be used to, for example, tamper with evidence data, with metering data, but also even more impactful with commands that would shut down certain equipment and would have a significant effect on infrastructure. This is something we need to act upon. So when I reflect about these kind of threats, I usually take the point of view that in my opinion, those attacks, they are very costly today. They are almost impossible today. It's work in progress. We don't know yet when it will happen, but the day will come that quantum computing capabilities will exist that put a threat. But in my opinion, those computing capabilities will come at a cost, and they will always have a certain cost. It will never be for free to do that kind of attack. So an attacker that will use those capabilities will always need to invest time, but also money into deploying those attacks. So I think it's important to make actually the comparison. For example, at my place at home, if I have a door lock at my place and the door lock could be hacked with quantum computing capabilities, I'm not so worried because I don't think there will be an attacker that will pay $1 million to break my door lock to get into my house. I don't think that will happen. But you could ask your question now, okay, if that door lock is not to my home, but is to a larger infrastructure, or it can have a disastrous impact on national interests, you may have hackers that have a certain incentive to do so. So that's where we need to look at first. We need to look at how to protect our critical infrastructure. So that's going to be the first line of defense that we need to build. The defenses, they are being defined currently. So again, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States, they are playing a key role into defining the new algorithms that are resistant against those capabilities. They have already released a number of standards, or a number of algorithms that have those capabilities to be resistant. In summertime, there are some new algorithms coming. With Kudelski, we are involved into that process, into those definitions. We are also involved into some projects related to the migration of systems, the quantum migration. And then we are also involved into some standards that are then implementing those migration plans and then providing solutions towards their membership and manufacturers using them. In the DLMS User Association, within the security task force, we also have an initiative on enabling quantum technology into the standard, so to make sure that we can use those algorithms from NIST into the DLMS protocol. So we have a group of representatives, experts from the membership, where we are defining this, we are advancing on that. The membership, those experts, they are people from utilities and people from manufacturers, so we have a nice mix that can look at, okay, what is possible to implement and then what makes sense from an operational point of view. So we're looking at all those aspects in DLMS to then make a decision, okay, this is the algorithms that we want to support, and then we will work further on the guidelines such that the membership can implement them correctly, and then also that the utilities can use them and move from the current classical crypto operational system towards a post-quantum, so quantum resilient approach. So that's something that is ongoing. We are discussing that in that membership. We're also discussing that with utilities and the regulators. Regulators these days, they are particularly concerned. So we hear more and more messages from regulators, like for example the UK. Only recently they asked for migration plans to be ready by 2028, and then to have the migration plan being completely deployed by 2035. 2028 is, in our world, that's tomorrow. So we need to have, as soon as possible now, our algorithms defined. So we're looking at NIST for that. NIST already has a few. There's in summertime coming more, and we will act then accordingly to have this as soon as possible in the standard.
Okay, but if I understand well, you expect with the new algorithms, with stronger, bigger passwords, new encryption, that new protocol will be resilient on quantum computing.
Yeah, that's the goal, and yeah, that's where we want. There's already some standards that already do that today. Typically, for example, web browsers today, they already most of them already support either fully quantum resilient implementations or what they call hybrid, which is a combination of post-quantum with classical combined. So that already exists today. It exists in web browsers where there is not an issue on battery or bandwidth. And so what we do now is we look into other kind of protocols that need to be implemented into systems where bandwidth is much more of a concern and we need to be efficient and so forth. So that's where we need to look into and take into account, indeed, as you mentioned, larger passwords. It's actually larger key material. It will be inevitable that you will need to have larger key material, larger certificates. So there will be an impact on the bandwidth, and we need to see how we can handle that best.
Okay, before this interview, you showed me your very powerful lab.
Yes.
So we should believe to you that we can be resilient on quantum computing, because
and then you saw,
because you are able to check all of that and test. I see that.
Yeah, so indeed we do a lot of research at Kudelski on post-quantum, on the quantum resilient algorithms. We have been participating also in the competition for the new algorithms, and indeed we're doing a lot of research on how secure are those algorithms when you implement them into devices, because it's not just about putting a software stack on a device and then you have secure protocol communication. Well, the communication is secure, but you might have other means to extract key material, like through side channel attacks. And indeed, we are looking into the technology on how can you have secure implementations, such that if people do side channel attacks on that software or even on the hardware, that they cannot obtain the key material. So yeah, exciting work we are doing at Kudelski. We're on the top of the game of that, so looking very much forward to working with the different partners in our ecosystem, so from chipset to device manufacturers and utilities to get to a secure, future-looking solution.
But tell me, what do you think about cybersecurity resilience in terms of AI and machine learning techniques against it?
Okay, so the good news is that for me the quantum is the real threat when it concerns cybersecurity. AI is much more a tool for getting better decision making into operations. It's lesser a tool for attacking. However, you can use AI to optimize some of the calculations you do into side channel attacks, for example. But it's not a dramatically new computing capability with respect to attacking the mathematics behind cryptography. So yeah, AI, it will be a useful tool for both the defense as the attack industry, let's say, or attack individuals, depending on how you see it as an industry or not. But I see it less as a threat with respect to what we see as the quantum threat. So.
Okay. And the last question, what is the most important lesson you learned throughout your career?
It's very simple. It's keep it simple. Because, yeah, we've been discussing about this whole transition in network and so forth, and the transition into cybersecurity, in the cybersecurity world and so forth. But in the end, you can end up with very complex systems, but you always need to approach it in as simple way as possible, because complexity is the enemy of cybersecurity. So my lesson I learned is that always keep it simple at all levels. So keep it simple in the way how you solve things, and then even if something might be looking complex, keep it simple in the way how you explain things. And I hope I was able to at least keep it a little bit simple here in discussion that we had to make sure it's a bit clear of how it looks like these days in the market.
It is very interesting advice from someone who take care about cybersecurity. Keep it simple.
It's our job at Kudelski to be able to handle the complexity, but make sure that it's simple, the way how it needs to be used and the way how it's deployed.
Okay, thank you for joining us, Brecht, and for sharing your expertise.
Pleasure.
This conversation has been full of valuable insights, especially for those working at the intersection of cybersecurity and energy systems. This concludes our third interview. Stay with us. We look forward to the upcoming joint webinar where we will once again hear from Mr. Wyseur and our other guests as they share their knowledge on the important topic of cybersecurity. Thank you.